During the Middle Ages, there were a large number of criminals. Because the majority of burglars were uneducated, medieval crimes became common. People were often forced to steal in order to survive. In some cases, people find themselves committing crimes in order to feed their family and survive. As a result, you could either get indebted or become a criminal. Crime and punishment. Crime and punishment in the Middle Ages were famously brutal and merciless. Unlike today's criminal justice system, there was no genuine police force, and the local community was in charge of maintaining law and order. The Christian Church also played a significant role in setting the penalties for individuals found guilty. They did, however, provide the accused with an option to avoid punishment by praying God would save their soul. Because there were few jails at the time, most punishments were designed to prevent other members of the community from committing crimes. While the death sentence is rarely used nowadays, it was extremely popular during the Middle Ages. Similarly, bodily harm is not a valid sentence in today's criminal system. When crimes happened, citizens were required to hue and cry. People had to stop what they were doing and go for the criminal. If they caught the criminal, they would face a jury and a judge in court. However, if they did not catch the criminal, he or she would not be punished. Except for significant crimes, they would not have been punished. Medieval villages also had sheriffs. The sheriff investigated serious crimes. Major crimes may result in an arrest and trial at a later date. Sheriffs weren't always honest. The Domesday Book showed that some sheriffs used their status to steal from others. Villagers weren't always honest. Villages were organized into tithings, which means 10 households per tithing. Torture and punishments. The types of crimes committed and the punishments associated with them have changed dramatically as civilization has evolved. The judge was used to be ultimately responsible for determining the actual penalty, a crime. If a child over the age of 7 committed a crime, they were treated as adults, sent to court, and punished accordingly. Children aged 7 to 12 were not necessarily punished. It was up to the judge, but their parents were frequently blamed for their child's bad behavior and may be punished instead. That too was up to the judge. Punishment was severe. People felt that if criminals were not punished severely, they would commit crimes again, inspiring others to do the same. If, for example, a baker deceived a customer by selling goods that were not as weighty as they should have been, and he was found and his guilt was proven to the satisfaction of the jury and court, his hands were cut off. Even children as young as 7 were hung for their crimes. Here are 5 of the most common crimes and their punishments during medieval times. 1. Petty theft. Stealing was one of the most common crimes committed in the Middle Ages. Petty theft refers specifically to the stealing of low-value commodities from a person or business. Depending on how serious the theft was, the punishment could vary from public humiliation to bodily mutilation. The most popular punishment for those found guilty of stealing was additional work or fines. According to the Dalarna Theft Code, the fine could range between 3 and 40 marks. While inconvenient, getting fined was not nearly as humiliating or dishonorable as the harsher punishments. Those found guilty of full thievery could be hanged or face a more terrible penalty, such as bodily mutilation. It was not commonplace for a thief's hands or ears to be severed, indicating to everyone that they were a criminal. 2. Treason. During the medieval period, deliberately setting fire to a building might have serious consequences for the community. Because structures at the time were composed of wood and straw, even small fires could quickly spread to many households. Treason is defined as being disloyal to the ruling king. This might range from attempting to murder the ruler to insulting the royal family. Those found guilty of treason got the harshest punishment, regardless of the severity of the crime. Treason was criminalized in 1351 and its punishment was defined. This penalty included a terrible death. The criminal was frequently hanged from a tree but was cut down before death. Once down from the tree, an executioner would behead them, dismember their bodies, and transport the body parts to different locations. The body parts would be displayed as a warning to anybody considering committing similar crimes. 3. Stealing crops. Unlike small crime, taking crops was regarded as a more serious offense than the ordinary pickpocketing that took place. Food was an important asset at the time, and harvesting and maintaining it required a lot of labor. Those found guilty of stealing crops from someone's land frequently had their hands severed, prohibiting them from stealing again and making them a public sight for others. Crops were frequently taken from high-ranking lords who owned land, giving the ruling class report phrase authority over the punishment of the lower, poor classes. 4. Murder. Murder is one of the most terrible crimes in modern crime and punishment, but it was just as serious in medieval times. Many murders were unsolved as there weren't any DNA or modern technology to aid in the investigation. While it was more usual in centuries ago, people found guilty of murder were sentenced to death. However, women found guilty faced a more horrific end than simply meeting the executioner. If a lady was found to have murdered someone, she would be hung, strangled, and then burned. Law and order were extremely strict in medieval England. It was believed that if people were afraid of what would happen if they broke the law, they would learn to act appropriately. Ordeals. Each accused person had to survive an ordeal. There were 3 ordeals. 1. The ordeal of fire. An accused person moved 3 steps while holding a red-hot iron bar. His hand was bandaged and left for 3 days. If the wound was healing after 3 days, you were innocent. If the wound had clearly not improved, you were to blame. 2. Ordeal of water. An accused guy was tied up and thrown into the water. If you floated, you were convicted of the crime. 3. Ordeal of combat. This was employed by noblemen who had been charged with something. They would engage in combat with their opponents. Whoever won was right. Whoever lost was usually dead at the end. Well, so here were some of the most common crimes and their punishments in the Middle Ages. If you like this video, then do subscribe to my channel, Medieval Mind, for more videos like this.